Welcome back.
All right, you ready?
Yes, yeah, man.
And 3, 2. You still clicking shit, nigga? You taking my mouse away. You forgot the transition.
No,
Nice.
I was just bringing my notes up.
Oh, all right, and 3, 2. What up? What up? Welcome to another episode of the After 29 podcast. This is episode 10. Stop the Hate. I'm Vincent Dunstan, aka Minister V, ready to get this conversation going.
Mozzie Boone up in the building.
It's your boy Malcolm Davis, a man of steel.
Clayton Foster, big shoulder brother in the building.
You saw he did that little hop when he said his name. Yeah, all right, guys, go in prayer. Eternal God, our Father, Lord, we come to you on this evening, Lord, to give your name honor, glory, and praise, Lord. Lord, we say thank you for last night's rest and the rising up this morning, Lord. We thank you for allowing us to just rise with all power in our hands, Lord, in your name. Lord, we ask that you'll bless this podcast, bless all the things that are said tonight, Lord, on this podcast. And we thank you for a platform that allows us to just talk about those things that are most important to us, Lord. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, guys, stop the hate. Talking about, all these senseless acts of violence against, human beings simply because of their race or the color of their skin. So we're not even going to do a long prelude. We're just going to jump right in, man. What are your feelings towards this, towards this violence, against Asians?
I definitely feel like it's is wrong all across the board or whatnot. No one should be treated like that. And and I understand that like Asian Americans know that how African Americans feel or whatnot. But for them to be treated like that is oh, my bad. It's definitely wrong in all levels. No one should be getting stabbed or spit upon or talked down to or anything like that at all. Because, at the end of the day, you have to think about it. Would you want someone to talk to your loved ones like that? Your wife, your siblings, your friends or whatever, even you. So, if you know you don't want to be treated like that, then why treat other people like that? So.
Yeah, I think it's disgusting, man. We out here hating the Asian Americans. Why? Because somebody, the president said that the disease came from China. I got a news flash for you. Not every Asian is from China.
Right.
They come from many different areas out there. So I just think it's crazy. I think it's stupid to hate somebody over something that they couldn't control in themselves. But we can definitely control the way we feel about people, and we can control the hate. So I think it's stupid. So y'all should stop it.
Right.
Yeah. I think we all can agree it's senseless, and like Malcolm said, like a lot of the videos and things I've seen online, when people are like hating on Asian Americans and talking about coronavirus and stuff, a lot of them not even Chinese,
yeah, exactly.
Which even if they were Chinese, it's still senseless. Like,
yep.
and most of the Asians they hating on are American citizens, just like everybody else.
Never even been back to their homeland.
Yeah.
So, for me, I feel pretty much the same way as these gentlemen. I'm always against senseless acts of violence. I don't care who it's against, whether you're white, black, brown, purple, simply to hate on someone or to simply just hate someone simply because of the color of their skin or their nationality. I think it's senseless, but not only that, we'll just be blunt and we'll say it. It's stupid. It shows a primitive mindset, and not only does it show a primitive mindset, it just shows the stupidity in people, and it just shows, and on a deeper level, it really just shows that the disease of hate just runs rampant, in people's heart, because you have to be full of hate and just all sorts of negative things to literally just simply hate somebody enough that you want to attack them simply because of their race. You're attacking an individual because of how you feel about the entire race. You can't tell me that that's not a person who has some type of mental disorder of some nature or some primitive mindset about them. So I like I said, I think it's stupid. I think it's pointless, and it is very senseless. And like one of you said, it's very disgusting. It's very disgusting that anybody wakes up in that day and says, "I'm going to go. I'm gonna attack some old lady." It was one article that I saw not too long ago, and it was an older lady, and I think she did successfully fend him off, but not without injury to herself.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about an old lady.
Yeah, I read an article. It was this old veteran, and it was it was a white guy that told him that he caused all of this, beat him up, and he had a veteran hat on, and he had a cane, beat up this Asian American, and he was an American, never been back to his homeland or anything, and he served in the army to protect this country, and your country are treating him like he isn't a citizen of this country. Right. Crazy.
So, and I'm glad you brought that up. So one question that I have, and this is just to get slightly off topic, we do know that in this country, a lot of minority races have served and are serving currently in our armed forces who pledge their lives and sacrifice their lives to, to protect this country and the citizens and our interests as a nation. Yep. What are your thoughts on the fact that these people of these minority races who go across seas and here and stay here, to protect our borders, and yet they're still treated like some outside? What are your thoughts on that? Because, and let me just segue a little bit to a part two of that question. It seems like in this nation, true patriotism only means anything if you are a white American. Yep. You're the only true patriot. If you're another nationality, even if you serve in the armed forces, it doesn't count anything. So what are your thoughts on that?
I honestly feel like, what's the point, of fighting for your country, and your country is not going to fight for you. At the end of the day, like, I mean, for example, just going on me, like, I wanted to go into the army and whatnot, and my grandfather told me, he said, don't fight no white man's war. You don't need to go. Exactly. But yeah, for them, I mean, it's like, what's the point? Like, you're not going to get respect or treated any different. So why fight for your country if they're not going to support you?
And it's been like that a long time ago, long time. Even when the black man fought in the wars and stuff like that. I mean, they fought for the countries, and they came back, and they were still segregated in those things over here. So it's been like that forever, and now it's just going towards another nationality, or race, Asian Americans and those things, man. Yeah. So news flash that this land wasn't even the white man's land either. Exactly. It was the Native Americans' land as well. So if you consider yourself a patriot, everybody else should be considered a patriot as well.
Yeah. I think that as far as like the military goes, like even just like researching different things on this topic, there are a lot of parallels that community has in common with us. They experience the racism a little bit different than us because we were brought here against our will, and we still weren't considered whole people. Right. With them,
3/5.
Right. With them, they most of their generations before them immigrated, were immigrants here, and although a lot of the Asian Americans now are like natural born citizens, people still look at them like, oh, you're not from here, even though they've been born here, and their parents and grandparents and great grandparents came here, to make a better life. I think they experience racism quite a bit different from us, but it's still very similar to what our people experience too. So I think that's why we should be able to sympathize with it.
So excellent point that you brought up, because that actually takes us into our next point here. And even though some of you, we talked about this on our conference call, and we all had our different feelings about it, me especially. And I will say this, because I'm not the only one that feels that way, wrong or right. But there are a lot in our community, in the black community, that feel that the Asian community did not show up or speak out during some of our plights. What are your thoughts on that?
I feel like that's the wrong mentality to have. Your thought process on saying like, oh, well, this person wasn't there to support you, so I'm not going to support for showing any love or support for that group or whatever. That's the wrong attitude to have. This isn't tit for tat. We're all in this together. So my thing is, why not show support and love to the Asian Americans and whatnot? Because I mean, they actually showed love and support for us. They were there during the Black Lives Matter protests. Even because when I did research, it was 73% of Asian Americans felt that they were connected to the BLM movement. So, like for anyone that thinks like, well, I'm not going to support them because they weren't there for us, you don't need to think like that, because how are you expecting to grow and change if you have that same mentality? You're never going to change. You're going to go through that infinite cycle, whatnot. So if you want change, you got to do something different. You got to break that cycle.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I never thought I'd see the day where one minority it don't want to help another minority in the country that's been hated on as much as we as being black men been hated on. So we know how it feels to be hated on against the Asians. The Asians are the true minorities in the United States. There's about 18 million Asian Americans. African Americans, we're about 48 million. So it's about 2.5 of us to one Asian. So they are the true. Now, I don't know what we expect the Asian culture to do during the Black Lives Matter, because they have so little power in the United States. What could they have done? Black men have more power than the Asian man has in the United States, right? But what I would say is that, just like Mazio said, that the black man, the Asian man, and the Hispanic man, we need to combine our resources, and we can be much more powerful. That's why they keep us oppressed, because they keep us separated, and that's what they want us to be.
Yeah, and Malcolm made a valid point that kind of spills into my thought on the subject. I think like Vincent, and he's not the only one that I heard that feels that way. Like, you know, what have they done for us in our apparel? But I think, you know, that school of thought comes from not really diving into like Asian American culture and like what they go through and how similar it is to our plight. And I mean, and if you look into the information like over the years, like with like Asian Americans, I mean, you remember when Pearl Harbor happened?
Yep. They locked them up in concentration camps.
Right. The Japanese were locked up in internment camps. And like, why can't we be like the African Americans of that time period when those people were locked up in internment camps? We sent them food. We wrote letters to them, like supporting them. Why can't we have some of that right now?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, it's just like sorry behavior going on, hating on them just because they're Asian, and you know, some of the flames have been fanned, just, you know, riling people up because of COVID and all that stuff. But you know, historically, Asian Americans have been there for us, like during like the Great Migration. You know how African Americans were going all over the country. When they went to Los Angeles, they couldn't live in white neighborhoods. Where did the African Americans live in Los Angeles during the Great Migration? In Little Tokyo with the Asian American community. So I think when people say, well, what have they done for us? They ain't been there for our plight. You haven't done your research. You haven't looked into it and see how they really have been there for us. And of course, I mean, it's just like all races. Yeah, I'm pretty sure there are some like older Asian Americans who, you know, fell into the stereotypes of black people. Yeah, I'm not saying that every Asian American loves black people. We know that's not true. Just like every black person doesn't love Asian people. And I think that's another thing that with what's going on now, a lot of people are confused about. They're thinking that, you know, it's all white people hating on Asians and doing, you know, these like horrible things to Asian people, but it's some of our people too. So I think we have a responsibility to the Asian community to show that, you know, our community is not against your community. Some of us are here for you. Yeah, we have some bad apples in the bunch, but we have a responsibility to show them that that's not how we view them.
And to so when Clayton was talking, I mean, it made me think about it. Like, and when we had the topic about history or whatever, if you don't know your history, you're going to just make assumptions and judge on stuff.
Exactly.
So my thing is, if we as African Americans, if we actually do our history and see the struggles that Asian Americans went through, that'll open our eyes and make us treat them differently. Because I mean, us attacking them for no reason, I mean, that's dumb. So, and the last thing I'll say is, you know, like I said, we're all in this together. Like Fred Hampton, I know, was, you know, in the leader of the Black Panther Party. And the thing was, it wasn't for just, you know, us, it's for everybody. So why not combine our ethnic groups with Asian Americans and do something positive? Because, I mean, you know, like you said, it's a rainbow coalition. But, yeah,
so one of the things that I'll definitely say was the other night when I guess there's a lot that felt like I did the other day when, you know, when some of this, we first started hearing about some of these census acts. Now, don't get it twisted. The first thing that I felt about these attacks was that it's stupid. I mean, because that I don't condone, nor do I understand why anybody wants to attack anybody just simply based on their race. And because because they think that the coronavirus originated in one particular nation, so we're just going to attack all the people of that nation. When,
it's
like
not,
you said,
it's not
most
confirmed.
of the people. My point exactly, and then most of the people that are maybe of Asian descent have never been to China.
Yeah, just like a lot of us never been to Africa.
We've never been
Right.
to Africa, you know,
Right.
but we have bloodlines that tie through it. So now I will be very, transparent and say that yes, I was one of those people initially who felt like, well, when we were going through our plight, where was the Asian community? I can be honest. I was one of those people who felt like that, and I asked that question. I was like, so yes, I will, I will denounce violence, senseless violence against any race, in that matter, any type of hate. I will denounce that all day long because I don't condone hate, because I'm not a man who has hate in his heart. But initially, my feelings were, and the guys can attest to this. My feelings on it was that while I don't condone hate and while I understand, I was like, I felt like that the Asian community was not there as a whole, not individuals. I'm pretty sure that there were individuals that did do things because I saw that. But I'm talking about as a whole. I personally did not see the Asian community speak out and stand up for the Black Lives Matter movement or just any of any issues that were plaguing our communities. So yeah, I was like, well, now while I understand that that is wrong, and I will speak against hate every day, all day, regardless of who it is, even if it's towards a white person, I will speak out against that all day long. But I also said, if you guys remember, I was like, but I will not protest, I will not publicly speak out, as far as that goes. I was like, there's a limit to that. And when I got, in my feelings. Now, let me say this, because I am man enough to admit when, yes, I hadn't thought it all the way through. I'm allowed my feelings, like we all are.
Right.
Now, the difference is, yes, after I got off the phone with my brothers, I started thinking about it. I was like, do I feel like I'm absolutely wrong? No, because I'm entitled to my feelings or whatever. I'm entitled to my feelings, how I felt. But I'm also man enough to know, like my brothers reminded me of, is that we're not a people who walk around with hate in our hearts. Mm-hmm. And I had to remember that. And I was like, now, while I don't hate anybody, I also have to remember that part of who I am says that even if you are my enemy and you don't love me, you don't support me in a particular way, I still, being the man that I am, should show that love and support and things like that. So I had to go and look in the mirror, and I had to adjust my view, or whatever, and not saying that necessarily changed my feelings. And I can't even say that, because it did change my feelings, because I had to come out of my feelings. Number one, remember that stoicism we talked about, being able to make a decision without being completely in your feelings. So I had to remove some of the emotion so that I can invoke some of the rationale to the situation. And I had to look at it for what it was, but then I also had to, as we know we should do, and that's to put myself in their shoes. If this was going on, ergo, it does happen to us, how do I feel about it when it happens to black people? So whether I felt like the Asian community stood up for us or not, the point is that I know what they're feeling, so I should be able to sympathize with my Asian brothers and sisters. So, and I appreciate my brothers. Let me tell you, my brothers spoke out, and they was like, well, how can you feel that way? Regardless of how they feel or what they did, we as black men, being the strength that we are and the men that we are, we have to set the example. We have to set the example not only for the world, but we have to pretty much deal with this situation the way we want others to deal with us in our situation. Right. So I appreciate y'all for that. I don't mind y'all calling me out, because I do it to y'all.
And it reminds me of that conversation that we had. It reminds me like a conversation that I had years ago with a person. They were complaining that they let somebody borrow some money or something. They did something for somebody and they didn't get a thank you. And I told them, I said, if you do everything in your life for others, wanting them to pay you back, wanting them to give you a thank you, you're gonna be nitpicking and be pissed off all the time because they don't respond in a manner that you would. That's not the point. The point is, if you want to be a blessing to someone,
absolutely,
you're not doing it for an outcome from that person, because at the end of the day, you're going to get your blessing for being a blessing. So I think in situations like this, we need to forget about what we stand to gain from helping and just be there for them, because we can understand the plight.
Yeah. So absolutely. So, and I'm glad you said that, because like I said, that was my thought process. You know, it's like I had to remember, you know, and I had to think about it as a Christian man. I was like you said, you don't do something for somebody else because you're looking for it to be reciprocated.
Exactly.
I'm doing it because it's out of the kindness of my heart, and because, like you said, I understand your plight. Now, my blessing is, first of all, as a blessing, and I preached this in a sermon once. When I do something for somebody, I don't want you to give me back what I gave you. Yeah. I don't want you to give me back anything, because literally all you can do is give me back what I gave you. Mm-hmm. But the true blessing is when I give it to you, I don't expect anything in return, and then God blesses me 100-fold for it. You know, sure. And most of all, when I'm not expecting it. Right. So, like I said, and I'm glad y'all, you know, brought that to my attention the other night, because like I said, it really made me think, because I was like, it doesn't matter what the Asian community did or the Hispanic community or whoever. We as black men, we tout ourselves as being one of true strength, like a true leadership. We say all the time, you know, we're kings and we're queens. Wear that mantra, you know, wear that, you know, and part of that is leadership. Yep. And that, you know, and that means, yes, setting the example. So and that was the question that we were going to talk about. You know, how do you feel about the black community being the ones, or being the example on what it takes to unite the races?
I feel like we should take that mantle, because I mean we know how how we were treated back in the past, and I mean we know how to react, and I feel like we should definitely talk to Asian Americans, combine our forces, and you know, I mean, talk about the different injustices that we both face or whatever. Mm-hmm. And by us doing that, I feel like we'll be able to understand one another even more. Mm-hmm. So,
well, I think if anybody can handle a crisis, it's the black man. I mean, our whole life has been a crisis, and we've done pretty well with crisis. If it's anything that we can handle, it's a crisis. Look at Obama, what he had to deal with when he came in.
And that man handled it with such grace and charm.
Exactly.
You know,
we know exactly how the Asians were feeling, because we go through this every day. Yeah. So we know how to live with the hate every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is new to them. Well, some of them I want to say is new, but if it's anybody that can sympathize with them and to help them, it's the black man.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's new to them. I think, and just like watching videos and reading articles and things about the subject, the Asian community, like I've learned from Asian people speaking. That was like a special on ABC or something they had talking about this. It was saying that like Asian people, like especially the older generation, their thing was they always need to keep their head down, don't make any trouble, don't bring any attention to the situation.
Just kind of fly under the radar.
Yeah. So they've been going through this forever, just like us. It's just not has been as loud, because I mean they're a smaller community than us, so it just hasn't been put out there. But it has spiked so rapidly now. It's new to us, because we were just in our own bubble, fighting our own struggle, and not even thinking about connecting with that community. Right. So it's not new. It's been happening to them the whole time. But to answer the question, I think if we become the example through doing the right thing, then so be it. I don't necessarily know that like it's our job to be the example, or we should take that on, maybe. But I think just doing the right thing is the most important factor. And absolutely. If we become that example of what that looks like, uniting the people, that's ultimately the end goal. Because I think, to me, that's what I was looking like. What's the solution? Where do we want to be? I mean, we want to be, just united as a country, and that includes Asian Americans, Latinos, the Black American, and white America. So I think conjoining with the Asian community to fight racism and injustice is just the start. But if we say all the time that we need allies that are white, we need allies from other communities, we should do the same thing and be their allies.
And we got allies from white people.
Oh yeah, we do. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, that's definitely one that we have to acknowledge that all the time, that we're, like I said, when you really think about it, yeah, we're not in this fight by ourselves. And there are times, yes, that we do forget that there are others in this fight with us, you know. Now, and one of the things that I was thinking about the other night after we got off our call, you know, and about being the example, not because we're trying to, again, we're not trying to get anything in return by being the example. Number one, being a true leader is just, like you said, doing the right thing.
Right.
Yep.
Simply for doing the right thing.
Right.
And, you know, and it reminded me of one of those, it reminded me of when I read in Matthew chapter 25, when Jesus spoke the parable and he talked to the disciples about, you know, he spoke to the people about, you know, about them doing the right thing, and he told the parable about the sheep and the goat. I'm not going to go into the whole chapter, but basically he told them, he was like, you know, when I was hungry, you fed me, and when I was thirsty, you gave me food to drink. And the people said, well, Jesus, when did we give you food and when did we give you something to drink? And what Jesus said was, whatever you did for the least of these, you did for me. And then the other side, he was like, when I was hungry, you didn't give me anything to eat. When I was thirsty, you didn't give me anything to drink. And they said, well, Jesus, when didn't we give this to you when we saw you? They was thinking so literal, but Jesus said, whatever you didn't do for the least of these, you didn't do for me. And really the whole point of that was that they did it simply because it was the right thing to do.
Yep.
It not because they needed because they thought it was Jesus. Like, oh, had we known it was you, we would have done it.
Right.
That wasn't it. You know, or and the other side said, well, had we, you know, we didn't know it was you or not you. We just did it simply because what? It was the right thing to do.
Yep.
Amen. So, but we're not going to preach here tonight.
Sound like you and Clayton been out here preaching today.
But that spirit get to
It
moving.
ain't my calling.
But
I said the same thing.
it's funny that you mentioned Matthew, because it made me think about a scripture, Matthew 7:12, and so in everything do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. So I mean, like, if we had that mentality, like, I mean, definitely. I mean, I feel like we should have that mentality at all times. So
Absolutely, man. So, you know, and we touched on this just a little bit, you know, but you know, what are the comparisons between the violence against Asians and what happens to blacks? Because in a general sense, they're going through things, being attacked. We go through things as well, but it's a little bit different. But what are the comparisons there between the two?
So honestly, like, I was trying to do, well, I mean, I did research and I was trying to find, like, you know, something big, and everything, like, someone getting beat up or killed or whatever is big, but like how, for example, George Floyd, I was trying to find something like done with like Asian, but the main thing I came up with is just that, you know, how both races are getting stabbed or talked down to for no reason or whatever, or being called the Chinese flu or being called a nigger
Chinese
or something,
virus.
the Chinese virus or whatever. So I mean, it's just I feel like it's the same across boards, you know.
Let me ask y'all a question. But let me jump in here real quick. Do y'all? Because now when I was thinking about some of that, like maybe like George Floyd, yeah, it happens in those sense, but to just everyday blacks just being attacked by people, and don't get me wrong, yeah, we are going to take responsibility that some of this hate and violence that is going on, it's some of our people too.
Oh yeah,
but let's just also be just as blunt. We know who the majority of the people that are doing this.
Yeah, they
Now-
wear magnet hats.
Yeah, they wear MAGA hats. Now, let me ask you this question, because that's not something you hear every day when we're talking about comparisons. That's not something you hear every day against black people, but so much. I have heard this before against Asians. It's not the first time that I've heard about these types of attacks against Asians. Do you think, and I'm only just asking a question because I saw it asked before, do you think that this happens more to Asians versus blacks? Because as a race, yes, they are smaller in population, but as a race, they're a little bit more passive than we are, because you don't hear about a lot of MAGA people attacking blacks. That's just not something you hear every day.
Well, I think
And the question is loaded, so but just
Trying to think how you wanna
entertain
answer
me.
this question.
I mean, that's my issue with when people say, you know, or they're not being attacked as much as us, or what did they do for us?
We're a
I think
bigger population than they are.
we're not trying to win the oppression Olympics. It doesn't matter how much.
This is not one race we want to win.
Right. It doesn't matter how much it happens here or how little it happens here. At the end of the day, I mean, it happens and it needs to stop. So I don't think that's even a relevant point for us to even explore, because at the end of the day, it's injustice and it needs to stop. Even
wrong,
if it was
wrong
one,
is wrong.
If it was one person.
Yeah.
So,
Now, and I'm gonna ask this question, and I already know the answer to it, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. What are your thoughts on, and do you feel that the previous administration has greatly...
Hold on, man. Hold on.
Okay.
We didn't finish the last question.
Okay, so go ahead.
Was
Because
about the comparisons between.
Yeah.
So, like what Mozzie was saying, he couldn't find like some things that were similar to what happened to our people. It's tons of things out there, like even all through history. Like I found it was in Los Angeles, the Chinese massacre, 1871.
Oh yeah,
It was 19 Chinese Americans who were killed because like the way it happened, it was like two companies, like Chinese companies or something. They were having a disagreement, and it's the Wild West. It's the 1800s, so it's the Wild West. So they started shooting each other, and then two police officers came in to break it up. One of the police officers got killed. So like days later, like a big mob of like 500 people started dragging Asian people out of their homes, and like store owners, like Chinese store owners and stuff, started dragging them out of their stores, like killing them, and hey, like 15 people got hanged, like 19, 20 people got killed. Some of them were like kids and stuff. So that was a huge massacre, like in LA. And then like the Rock Springs massacre, 1885. It was a mining company where it was white workers and Chinese workers, and the Chinese workers, they were already paid less than the white workers, and the white workers felt that they weren't getting paid enough, so they were gonna go on strike, but they knew that the Chinese workers wouldn't strike with them because they were already getting paid less, and they didn't want to stir up any chaos. So what they did was they decided to kill all the Chinese workers so that once they went on strike, they wouldn't just hire more Chinese people so they can get paid more. So they started killing Chinese people that worked in the mines, and a lot of them fled, but a lot of them were killed.
Wow.
And even after that, it was still a big mess. Even after, the U.S. Army ended up coming in to bring back order to the town. It was in Wyoming, I believe. And after they restored order, the Chinese people went back. They reluctantly, because they were afraid for their life, and like their homes got burned down and tore down. They had to live in train cars and stuff and still work, to earn money for their families or whatever. And then another one that's like more recent was like in '82, Vincent Chin. He was like at a strip club because it was his bachelor party. He was about to get married, and he's I think he was Vietnamese, or they mistake he was Chinese, I believe. They mistaked him for a Japanese man, and we know like in '82, that's when the Japanese auto market like just boomed, and that took some job from the American auto, and it's
a lot of jobs.
It's Michigan, so the GM plants and everything were huge in Michigan, and with the boom of the Japanese automobiles, it kind of lost some jobs in the American car plants and things like that. So a lot of the workers were mad. So they ended up seeing Vincent Chin, and two guys ended up killing him because they thought he was Japanese and he was Chinese, I believe.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying earlier, man. They come from all different nationalities. They're not just one nationality, Asian groups.
Yeah, and they ended up, instead of getting second-degree murder, they ended up getting off with manslaughter, $3,000 fine, and like 3 years probation or something like that. It sounds very similar to what happened to Emmett Till.
Right. Yep.
Wow.
Very similar.
And so that's what I'm saying. It's a lot of parallels, and a lot of people would say, okay, well, those things are ancient history, but look at this year.
Yeah, exactly.
The guy in Atlanta.
Yeah. And like, and let me go back, since when I was doing my research or whatever, I didn't like look back in the past, so I wish I should have done that. But yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's tons of things that are very similar to. I know it's a shorter time frame because
sound like
we've been here since
Tulsa,
slavery,
Oklahoma massacres and all.
Oh yeah. So it's a lot of similarities that's happened to them over the years. Yeah, they've been here a shorter amount of time than us, and they chose to come here, but it doesn't lessen the plight that they've been through throughout the years that they've been here.
Right.
Okay.
Good job, man. History major Clayton. I didn't know a lot of that though.
Yeah, neither did I. So I'm glad you brought that up because that actually answered one of the next questions that I was going to ask was basically was there a comparison to what they're feeling today, as in comparison to what blacks feel every day or whatever, and that actually answers it because this is not something new, as you basically just pointed out. So everything that as a black man and a black woman that we feel every day, I mean I still want to ask it to a degree because like a lot of it, like how we feel like if we go out and we get a traffic stop, am I coming home today? So I wonder, part of what I want to ask is, do you think that Asian Americans have those types of feelings when they leave home every day?
Oh, yeah.
And I'll just go ahead and quickly answer for me, just based on what Clayton has just schooled us on. I would have to say that, yeah, they do. Maybe not to the same degree, or maybe not in the same situations. Maybe they don't fear cops or whatever, but maybe they just fear walking down the street where we fear driving down the street.
Right.
Well, they might fear cops now based on what.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I saw. It was an interview and they were talking about like the Asian community, just like us. They don't really try to stir anything up because they're afraid of cops. They don't want to cause a ruckus. They don't want to bring attention to the issues because they think it's going to cause more issues. Like traditionally,
Right.
I think it's not as much. So like the younger age of the Asian communities now, I think they're just like the younger people of our community are standing out and speaking up more so than the older
I totally
generations.
agree.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like they're scared of cops, and I mean. To actually look at it, we're both the same. I mean, even though we're different colors, different cultures, whatever, we're still like, we still both have the same fears of police. Just walking down the street, a random person come up and punch you or stab you, or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I mean, yeah, I feel like they have the same fears as we do. So
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So now that takes me into my next question about. Like I said, I already know the answer to this question. We already know the answer to this question, but. Do you feel, and what are your thoughts on the notion that the previous administration has greatly, and I am emphasizing the word greatly, contributed to or was the catalyst to this breakout of violence against Asians today?
Well, this shows you that words have power. He was the president that came out and called it the Chinese flu, Kung flu, and all of those things, man. Words have power, and him being at the top, the president, the commander-in-chief, he should have been very, very careful with what he said, but he didn't care. Why he didn't care? Because they put him in office, because they knew he wouldn't care. And I think that's the sad thing about this all is that it's not confirmed that the virus actually came from China. It's not confirmed. Nobody has confirmed that.
Right.
The Chinese people saying that the virus came from the United States. Right. So just quit it, man. It's a pandemic. It happens, and we just got to move forward and get through it.
Right. I mean, I don't know if you. Yeah. I mean, pretty much. I feel like the previous administration opened Pandora's box when people looked at that and they said, well, hey, Trump can say whatever. That he's open and can call people like the Chinese flu or whatever. Mm-hmm. I guess we can do it too. Right. So I mean, I feel like, and I'm not blaming a particular race. I feel like the media and Trump himself, I mean, definitely played a big role in this. And then even to go into like further about this whole thing, well, the whole media thing is that they show, and I know us as African Americans, we did hurt some Asian Americans or whatever, but it seemed like that's all they showed. They showed us like pushing a man to the ground or whatever, but then there's other people that have done it as well. There's been white people, there's been Indians, I mean, different things like that. So we definitely need to do our research. We don't need to be fooled by the media and just assume, one thing, because I mean that's what messes us up. Because if we don't have, for example, for me, if I didn't know Asian American or whatever, and I didn't have a relationship with them, and I'm looking at it on the news, and I'm seeing like, or just meeting and seeing how they're portrayed, like they don't like black people, I'm gonna automatically assume, well, hey, they don't like us, so why am I going to deal with them? Or vice versa. They look on movies and they see us betraying, like, we're sagging our pants, like talking loud, shooting, stealing from people, and they don't have a relationship with a black person. They're going to assume, hey, well, maybe all black people are like that.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I mean, what I found, I kind of stumbled upon, just researching the history of like relationships between, the Asian community and the African American community. With what the previous administration, like the words that were used, it reminded me of, in the 80s when Reagan was using the term model minority, which was something that was through the 60s through the 80s that came up, where they were saying that the model minority stereotype is that Asians are the good minority versus black people are the bad minority. So that just created division like in the 80s between blacks and Asians, because we felt like, that when him saying that, he was saying that the Asian community is better than the black community. So even back then in the 80s, our people were attacking Asians because of the administration.
The divide that they put between us.
That's why they keep us the oppressed. They separate us.
Yeah.
So that's why, like, I was triggered. Like, when we had that conversation, talking about what Asians didn't do nothing for us, why should we do for them? I'm like, bro, this sounds just like what's happened before. And like, if you don't know these things, we're doomed to repeat them. And it is so similar. Like, calling it the Kung Flu and all this stuff. It's just like that model minority stereotype that they were perpetuating back in the 80s.
Right. What's up?
Yeah. So I mean, we all agreed on that when that question was posed before. Definitely. Now, as somebody pointed out, I mean, first of all, hate is nothing new.
Right.
Hate is not new. Discrimination is not new, and senseless violence is not new. But when you have who's supposed to be the so-called leader of the free world, basically, I don't know, pretty much joining in on the hate and actually sparking the hate. I do believe that the previous administration, and I'll be completely blunt and say it, I truly believe that Donald Trump himself, was the main catalyst to more of this, because it was always going on. Now, one thing I remember when the coronavirus first came out, I do remember that there were some attacks on Asians then, early last year. Now that I remember it, that there was just some senseless attacks even then. But yeah, definitely when you have the person who's supposed to be the leader of the free world here, definitely the leader here of one of the greatest nations in the world, basically, like you guys said, touting discriminatory, propaganda and things like that. Yep. He was already put in office because he played on people's hate.
Yep.
And he made it okay. Yep. So not only that, you played into these people's hearts, you gave them a voice, whereas before they kind of didn't have one in the last 50 years. And now you have the president of the United States, basically saying some of these harmful things. You can't help but ignite a flame under some of these people to where they just like, if the president can say this and say that, I should be able to go out and slap an 80-year-old woman, and beat her down just because she's Asian, and it's okay. The problem, so here's and I don't want to get too much off topic because we're going to our closing point. I do believe that some of this with some of these MAGA citizens, I want to call them, I believe that they have the audacity to do this because in a lot of senses, a lot of these things that happen, it goes unchecked. Yep. They get a slap on the wrist. I mean, not that this happened to Asians, but the guy that killed those people the other day, that down there? They said he was having a bad day.
And then they said sex addiction. Yeah, I'm
Get out of here,
he
man.
was having a bad day and a sex addiction, but George Floyd was a threat.
Right.
To where you had to lean on this man's neck, on his neck, and you stayed there for over 8 minutes until the man died.
Just like the kid that pushed I think he was like 84 or something. Pushed him over and he ended up dying in a couple of days. They didn't say he was having a bad day.
Right.
Yeah.
And then my thing is, and that's why I was talking about the media. It's crazy how they tried to downplay that whole situation with, the Asian, I think it was the 6 Asian ladies that got shot or whatever. Mm-hmm. So now they're trying to say, oh, well, back in the past, they used to have prostitution rings or something like that inside. And I'm like, why are y'all downplaying it? Like, it's not about that. We're worrying about the people that got shot and killed.
Have
And
you-
then on top of that, they're trying to say it's not a hate crime, but he
definitely
went
a
to
hate
different.
But that's the thing, like that I stumbled across when I was like studying these hate crimes. It's hard to prove a hate crime because without like any hate speech and racial slurs, you can't really prove was their intent to harm that person just because there was Asian. It's only speculation. There's no nothing that's tangible that you can.
Well, it's always gonna be hard when you ain't got no witnesses because you killed them all.
Yeah.
It's always gonna be hard.
But the thing is, okay, so for me, just looking on the outside in, I mean, just going to 3 different shops, like Asian massage places, I mean, I feel like
I mean, we all knew it was hate.
I mean,
Right.
but I guess I don't want to get into law here, but to me, that would establish a pattern and a motive.
Right, and
Right.
on top of that, if I'm not mistaken, I'm gonna have to go back and check. I thought they said they caught that he had a hate crime shirt or something like that he made.
I don't know.
I have to look back at that.
But yeah,
But
but
at
that's
the
one
end
thing I
of the
found
day-
is like hate crimes are like some of the hardest crimes to prove because
Well-
unless there's like recorded like
Right.
hate speech or things like that, you can't really.
They can prove it if they wanted to. but
And
it's
that's what I was going to say.
it's
Because
their
my
get
thoughts
out
on
of
that
jail free
is
card.
it's hard to prove something like that when the officers, the police chiefs, the judges, and all of them have the same mindset.
Yeah,
when
exactly.
they don't, when like I said, like we said in a previous episode earlier last year, if they don't value the life, no one else will.
Right.
If the police officer doesn't value the life, they take it. If the judges don't value the life, they won't make fair rulings. So and I guess that's one of those things that that's. I hate to say it, but that's kind of one of the hands that we're dealt right now in this nation. We have leaders. So my boy Malcolm loves to say this, and he is absolutely right. This is why we have to vote. This is why we have to get out there and put leaders in there who have our best interests at heart, because we do have leaders and people in authority who do not value your black life or your Asian life.
Right.
Therefore, they will not make rulings that will protect your lives.
Yep.
All right.
Exactly.
Let's move on. So in closing, I want to ask you guys, man, what can or should we do as the black community? What can we do to help the Asians in their plight against this senseless violence, man? Like, what can we specifically do?
I mean, spread knowledge around. I mean, by you knowing more, I mean, you're able to do more or whatnot. So, I mean, if you don't have a relationship with an Asian American or whatever, I mean, try to sit down and talk to a person and get their idea and aspects on how they go through everyday life or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Once y'all both talk about it and understand each other, I mean, a relationship is born, and y'all could just spread that knowledge around. So.
I think the first thing we have to do, we got to stop the hate.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be hating against another minority group at all, period, no matter where they come from. And the second thing, I would say we should extend our hand to them and try to help them as much as we can. I think the best thing we can do is just support them in their efforts and thing. And I said, if we can combine our resources, we're gonna be very, very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how they keep minorities oppressed. They separate them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. I think there are a few key points that we can do to show that we care. Like I say, if you know some Asian people, just let them know that you support them and that you're there for them. Number 2, I think a lot of us, just Americans who aren't Asian, should start to understand that every Asian's not Chinese.
I think that is the most ignorant thing that I have ever heard. Man.
And this even like just like within our community, how colorism and things like that, the self-hate, they got some of that too. Because I seen that like a lot of the like East Asians, like China and things like that, kind of look down against on like the South Asians and stuff like that, and like people like Filipino people say they feel like the black people are the Chinese race. So there's some things within their own community they have to fix as well. But all we can do through those times is like show some support and not expect a return like for helping them or helping them get through this crazy situation that's going on. We shouldn't expect anything from them. We should just do it just because to show love.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, you guys really said it all. I mean, I really just piggyback on, I think the biggest thing we could do, like you guys said before, is just be the example, but part of that, now I will add that part of being that example is we got to start within us.
Right.
Because no one's going to follow us if how are we supposed to support them as our Asian brothers and sisters when we can't even really support our own brothers and sisters and support them and stand up for them and have each other's back. How are we supposed to unite with the Asian race when we can't even unite within the black race?
Yep.
So that's all I'll say there. It's been another episode of the After 29 podcast, man. I hope y'all enjoyed. I hope you got something out of this. But overall, man, y'all stop the hate. Until next time, peace.
Peace.